Brexit shows how politics can upset the best laid plans of business. With a very uncertain political landscape in Europe, could there be more shocks in store? In this next chapter, we talk to Ben Brogan, Group Public Affairs Director for Lloyds Bank, to get some guidance. So Ben, we've seen with the Brexit vote how politics can impinge on the best laid plans of business, and it's a very contentious issue within the UK political scene. Do you think domestic politics is going to influence the process as we go ahead?
Politics felt very uncertain last year, but it feels even more uncertain in 2017. What's really striking about the Brexit debate is as every day passes, the political landscape shifts. And so it's very hard to say where we will end up at the end of this year, let alone by the end of the negotiations. What's clear is that Theresa May is manoeuvring all the time to keep her party on side. And at the same time, Labour is tying itself into knots over how to respond to the government's approach. What that tells us is that we can't be certain of anything.
Right. Okay, it's not just domestic politics, but we've got to worry about Eurozone politics as well. We've got elections coming up in the Netherlands, France, and Germany later on in the year. How could that change the landscape for us?
One of the uncertainties for Theresa May is she doesn't even know who she's going to be negotiating with by the end of this year. The fact is that in France, the presidential elections will bring a new president, but they could also lead to the election of the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. At the same time, in the Netherlands, there is a possibility of another far-right government there, and that will tilt Europe away from a consensus around the European project and could in turn influence how the Brexit negotiations play out. So Theresa May will be looking at that with great interest.
So far, the leaders in Brussels have been very resolute about not changing anything about the single market principles. But if they had the election of a far-right leader in France, for example, do you think they would then have to shift?
If the popular insurgency that we've seen in the UK over Brexit and in the United States with the election of Donald Trump starts materializing in other European countries, then the debate will become much wider than Brexit. It'll be about the very future of Europe. And I think the interesting thing will be whether or not the political systems on the other side of the channel are strong enough to withstand those demands and those challenges.
Okay, now you mentioned Donald Trump there. Theresa May was the first leader to go in and see newly elected President Trump. They seem to get on well, and he's pro-Brexit. How helpful do you think that is to her?
Well, I think it's a slightly dangerous thing for her because Donald Trump is a slightly unknown entity and nobody's quite sure what he'll do one day to the next. The fact is that she realizes that the UK's strategic interests remain in being closely allied to the United States. But in the end, Donald Trump's key influence is over the global economy because the United States is the engine of the global economy. And it's his decisions on the economy which will really shape how Brexit and how European politics plan out.
Now, when the campaign was on to leave or to remain, the Leavers said, look, once we're outside the European Union, we'll be able to do all these wonderful trade deals with India and China. How realistic do you think that is now as we're getting into the process?
One should always be an optimist and hope for the best, and the fact is that there are plenty of opportunities out there, and we're beginning to see from some of the bilateral conversations that the government is having with different countries that there is lots of potential there. But at the same time, deals are about diplomatic relationships, and there will be all kinds of trade-offs where we'll want to do a deal with India, for example, but India may want to say, well, I don't want to do a deal with you unless you soften your stance on controlling migration. So the fact is that the diplomatics and the politics of trade deals are far more complicated than perhaps people realize. And while we want to be optimistic, the fact is there is a lot of hard work to do.
Well, just picking up on that migration issue, obviously that's one of the big issues that Theresa May has said she'll get migration down and control of migration with her negotiations with the EU. Realistically, can she do that?
One can only observe that while she has decided to make migration and control and a return to sovereignty her priority, the fact is that economics always drives politics. And in the end, the thing she will always be alive to is any sign that Brexit is having any kind of consequence, negative consequence, for the British economy. And when that starts to happen, if it does, that might start to force her to change her stance. And that is why politics remains so uncertain in the UK.
Okay, Ben, we'll watch what happens with interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.